South of Midnight is at its core an interactive collection of short stories and folk tales, full of heart-wrenching storytelling that's incredibly sweet, but at the same time, incredibly tragic. It provides cautionary tales that teaches us the importance of empathy and to reserve judgment, while it questions your morality. It's a game that begs to be experienced and understood more than played. Sure, there's gameplay to be had, but it honestly just gets in the way of what truly makes this game special.
Mama will be there in the morning. Mama will be there in the morning.
Me next.
South of Midnight starts off with our protagonist Hazel packing boxes in preparation for an imminent hurricane. This is nothing new to her, but the late arrival of her mother and ensuing argument as a result causes Hazel to storm out the house to check on her neighbors. As this happens, her house is swept away in a flash flood with her mother still in it. Immediately, Hazel gives chase and effortlessly tackles all the physical obstacles in her way. When she comes to a dead end, her last hope is to go see her estranged wealthy grandmother who provides no such help. In fact, she locks Hazel in her room expecting her to give up the chase. But in her escape, she happens upon a set of hooks that allows her to manipulate the world's magical aura.
Do these control you?
This is the setup for the story, and it's one of the biggest issues I have with the game. While not a major one, it's something that tickled the back of my mind the whole time I was playing. The issue is, the reason for this whole adventure is the fact that Hazel's mother is washed out in a violent flash flood, and what's worse is that she didn't leave on the best terms. This in itself is a great setup to emotionally attach you to the story. The problem is, I don't think it's an appropriate setup for what will inevitably amount to a lengthy journey in rescuing your mother. I've seen flash floods and tsunamis in videos, and I've seen the destructive power they carry. Surely if your mother was carried away in her home on such violent waters, then wouldn't her rescue be of the utmost importance, and not to mention, an extremely time-sensitive matter? The whole time after this event occurred, it felt like all urgency was thrown out as your character takes their time to explore the world and read notes. Yeah, I know it's a game, but it just broke my immersion every time the thought crossed my mind. Once again, I ask that you please leave a like on this video, as you know it helps me push it a lot further. But more importantly, thank you for your time if you made it this far. And with that, let's get back to the video. South of Midnight takes place in Chickasaw County and is set to the backdrop of the Deep South. This rural region in America is most commonly associated with slavery, and surprisingly, the game doesn't shy away from that. In fact, I had no idea this game would cover such dark and serious themes. I will try my best not to spoil any of it, but I might need to show some of it to explain my points. And with that, here's your minor spoiler warning. So, once you get your hands on the hooks and set off to find your mom, that's when the game really starts. On your adventure, you'll come across many strange and peculiar characters, each with their own backstory that unfolds as Hazel confronts these tragic events. As she does this, she slowly pieces the puzzle together until the full picture becomes clear, giving her and the player some much needed perspective on the whole situation. These shocking revelations is what really keeps you hooked. All these stories are deeply moving and keep you guessing as to how these poor souls came to be this way. This is the highlight and the main draw of the game, but the real kicker, for me anyway, is by far the music that accompanies these stories. It adds another layer of emotional investment in a way that I've never seen before in a game. They do this by narrating pieces of the puzzle through song, and as you uncover more and more of the story, it swells up to a point where the music itself is so emotionally charged that the player is urged to put the tormented soul to rest.
He was my brother, Benji his name. He saw things different, he was my shame. And I said goodbye, I said farewell. I took my hammer, my ticket to hell.
There's so many points in this game that stuck with me because the music was so memorable. I don't want to spoil too much of this game, but I must make a special mention to one of those bosses that very quickly became an all-time favorite. The funny part is, it's not even a good fight. In fact, I would consider it to be a bit flawed. but damn if it wasn't memorable.
I break my bones, I rend my skin, bricks turn to dust, and rage within. It sears my soul, sets my veins aflame. Never hold, just myself to blame.
Alright, let's tangle in the bramble. How does it actually play? Well, as I mentioned before, combat feels like something to simply get through to experience the rest of the game. It's incredibly straightforward and mediocre in design. Tapping the attack button will result in a 5-hit combo. Hold for a charge shot that's far-reaching and does decent damage. When an enemy is knocked, you can unravel them for a tiny bit of health, while some enemies will need to be unraveled or they'll keep coming back. In addition to your base attack, you will unlock a handful of special attacks that fill up the triggers and bumper buttons. These attacks have a short cooldown which can be hurried by unraveling enemies. There's no block button, but you can jump and dash to avoid taking damage. Plus a well-timed dodge will cause a damaging explosion. As for what you'll be fighting, it's this stuff. They're called Haints, and they're the physical manifestation of tragedy and sorrow. While they might look like corruption manifest, and visually that does seem fitting, I didn't find them fun to engage with. They often spawn and hang around off screen and hit you with ranged attacks. But more importantly, most of them look like black masses of wispy goop, so it's kind of difficult to read their attacks. This is not a major issue as they have a very limited range of attacks, and they aren't particularly challenging. It's just a bit off-putting honestly, and it holds you back from ever getting invested in the combat, and it just ends up being a piece of the game that you have to get through to see the rest of the game. Funny enough, the developers thought the same thing. And believe it or not, there's an option to skip combat encounters altogether, which to me is just a wild decision in an action-adventure game. You can also opt to skip bosses, which again blows my mind to think that that's an option, but I would strongly recommend you don't do that. Otherwise you might skip one of the most memorable boss fights in recent memory.
Where are you headed?
Now let's get into some of my weirder impressions and takeaways. For starters, I believe this game would have made one hell of a launch title. For some reason it had that air about it. It's no doubt a standout in visual fidelity and art style, not to mention a great way for the Xbox Series X to boast its graphical power, being an exclusive and all. I also think that 8 out of 10 feel about it fits in that launch title category, but mostly it's the gameplay that feels so old school in design, like it's a bit too late to the party. Things like being locked into combat areas, the extremely small upgrade tree, the very limited movesets and simple enemies, boss fights that play out in stages, and also something that feels way too much like it was ripped out of a pre-2010 Sony exclusive. I'm talking about this little puppet. His name is Crouton, and occasionally he helps you by getting into these hard to reach places, by unraveling knots or collecting upgrade material. This, in my opinion, really adds nothing of substance to the game beyond a short distraction. It feels like something out of one of those mascot games from the mid-2000s, but I'm just one person, who knows, maybe it works for some of you guys. But while I'm on this topic of old school game design, I just want to run something past you guys. While I was making my way through this game, I was constantly thinking of the Sly Cooper games. If you've already played this game, tell me if that same thought ever came to your mind. Maybe it's just the villain Miss Ruby, you know, the master in voodoo that lives in the bayou. Maybe that's what's given me this thought. But I like to think it's more the memorable characters, unique and diverse locations, thematically appropriate music, the multi-tiered boss fights, and more importantly, the striking and colourful art direction. This got me thinking, you know what? If Sucker Punch, the creators of the Sly series, is too busy with Ghost of Yotei, I wouldn't mind if Sony handed the Sly Cooper IP to these guys at Compulsion Games. Just a thought. Finally, I just want to end with a quick round of pros, cons and things I thought was simply worth mentioning. For starters, the game runs well enough on PC and Xbox from what I understand. Nowadays, it's rare to see a day one release that isn't broken, so that's nice. Next, I know some people are not into the art style, and I'm talking about the staggered frame rates that mimic stop motion animation. Personally, I love this stuff, but if you really hate it, there is a toggle which disables this during gameplay. Unfortunately, it doesn't apply to cutscenes. One other thing I forgot to mention is the level design is mostly linear, with many short detours that reward you with upgrade material and notes. And lastly, game length. This game will take you roughly 10 to 12 hours to beat, sub 10 if you gloss over all the notes and optional pathways. South of Midnight is very unremarkable in its gameplay, putting all its effort into its amazing visuals, characters and storytelling. But while its combat leaves a lot to be desired, its exploration is entertaining enough to keep you vested in its heartfelt story as it unfolds. This in itself is the only reason you need to play this uniquely compelling game. Its themes are dark and tragic, but explores them in a way that invokes the player's deepest emotions if they'll allow it. It's a game that sticks with you well after the credits have rolled, not because of how it played, but how it made you feel. South of Midnight's depiction of the Deep South's culture and mythos is expressive as it is vibrant, and it's a shame that we don't often see this love and attention given to these smaller pockets of the world that are clearly so incredibly rich with stories and culture that's just waiting to be explored. Alright, that wraps up another one. I want to thank you if you made it this far, and leave a like if you can, you know it really helps me out. And let me know in the comments, have you been playing South of Midnight? I know this game is not going to vibe with everyone out there, but if it did, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.